On July 6, 2013, a young pilot took control of a commercial airliner for the very first time in his career. It was supposed to be a routine descent with an experienced instructor at his side. The skies were clear, and the runway was visible on the horizon. But as the aircraft neared the ground, what started as a proud moment for this rookie pilot would soon spiral into an all-out emergency, claiming the lives of 3 passengers on board. This is the story of a rookie pilot's first landing and how it descended into total chaos. On the morning of July 6, 2013, an Asiana Airlines flight was nearing San Francisco International Airport. It was a Boeing 777, one of the safest and most reliable aircraft in commercial aviation, and Asiana Airlines itself had a strong safety record up to that point. In the cockpit, there was a rookie pilot, Captain Lee Kang-kook, who had logged nearly 10,000 hours in his career, but his experience with the Boeing 777 was limited. He had only 43 hours on this aircraft type and was still in training. This landing would be his first attempt at manually landing a Boeing 777 without the assistance of an instrument landing system, or ILS. Sitting beside him was his instructor, First Officer Lee Jeong-min, a highly experienced pilot with over 12,000 flight hours. However, also, this was his first flight as an instructor. Despite his extensive experience, this was also his first time flying with Captain Lee. The conditions for the approach seemed favorable. The weather was clear, with visibility over 10 miles and light winds. However, a critical system was unavailable: the glide scope. A crucial part of the ILS that guides aircraft vertically during approach was out of service. This meant that Captain Lee would have to rely on visual cues and manual control to manage the descent angle. This was a demanding task, especially for a pilot with limited experience in the Boeing 777. The initial stages of the descent went smoothly. First Officer Lee Jeong-min watched attentively, observing but letting the rookie captain make his own decisions. The autopilot was set to flight level change speed mode, meaning it would adjust the plane's pitch to maintain the selected airspeed. However, it was still up to Captain Lee to manage altitude, speed, and the descent angle. As they passed through 4,800 feet, the plane captured the localizer, keeping them laterally aligned with the runway. At this point, Captain Lee called for flap 1, and First Officer Lee confirmed the setting. But they were descending faster than intended, and the plane was drifting slightly off the ideal 3-degree glide path. Approaching 4,300 feet, Captain Lee adjusted the autopilot to vertical speed mode, setting a descent rate of -1,000 feet per minute. This adjustment allowed him more control over the rate of descent, but required even closer attention to airspeed. The plane began to drift above the correct glide path, and its speed remained higher than it should have been. Sadly, neither the captain nor the first officer nor the other 2 relief pilots noticed any issue at this point. Captain and First Officer Lee were somehow too focused on their tasks, and they overlooked the cumulative effect of that minor miscalculation. As they continued, the relief first officer, seated behind them in the jump seat, reminded them of the air traffic controller's instruction to maintain 180 knots until they were 5 minutes from the runway. Captain Lee acknowledged this, but they still hadn't reduced their speed, and the plane's altitude was off. By now, the workload in the cockpit was getting tougher. At 2,600 feet, Captain Lee called for the landing gear to be extended, hoping the added drag would help slow them down. But even with the landing gear deployed, the descent rate wasn't enough to regain the correct glide path. However, in hindsight, they could have also deployed additional flaps at this moment to increase the drag even further. Sadly, neither the captain nor the first officer thought in that direction and missed a golden opportunity to save the day. At around 1,900 feet, Captain Lee called for flaps 20, hoping to create more drag. First Officer Lee confirmed the change. However, even with the added flaps, the plane was still positioned too high on the glide path, and their speed remained difficult to manage. As they descended to 1,000 feet, visual indicators along the runway, known as PAPI lights, showed 4 white lights, signaling that the plane was well above the correct glide path that was safe for landing. Again, Captain Lee had another chance to initiate a go-around at this point to salvage the situation. But instead of initiating a go-around, Captain Lee pressed on, attempting to regain control. Approaching 500 feet, a critical altitude for determining whether to continue or abort the landing, the descent had not stabilized. The signs were clear. The airspeed was dropping and the plane was still too high on the approach, but no one in the cockpit made the call for a go-around. Both pilots focused on managing the situation and pushed forward with the approach, unaware of just how close they were to disaster. At just 200 feet above the ground, the cockpit alarms began to sound. The aircraft's airspeed had dropped to 122 knots, dangerously close to the stall speed for their configuration. The PAPI lights along the runway now showed 4 red lights, a clear warning that the plane was far too low on its descent path. With the airspeed continuing to drop, Captain Lee pulled back on the control column, trying to pitch the nose up to maintain altitude. But it was already too late. The aircraft was descending rapidly, and the runway threshold was approaching fast. The stall warning, known as the stick shaker, activated as the aircraft's nose pitched up, vibrating the control column in the captain's hands. This was an urgent warning that the plane was losing lift and would soon be unable to stay airborne. Recognizing the imminent threat, First Officer Lee quickly advanced the thrust levers, hoping to add enough power to arrest the descent. The engines responded, but it wasn't enough. Their altitude was too low and their speed too critical. The aircraft has to land at that point. At just 39 feet above the ground, the tail of the Boeing 777 struck the seawall at the edge of the runway. The impact tore the tail section from the fuselage, sending it skidding along the runway. Passengers and crew were jolted by the impact, some thrown forward in their seats as the main fuselage spun 360 degrees, scraping along the ground before coming to a halt in the grass beside the runway. In the immediate aftermath of the crash, emergency responders and airport fire crews were on high alert, rushing to the aircraft within moments. The scene was chaotic, with debris scattered across the runway, thick smoke rising from the fuselage, and passengers scrambling down the emergency slides. Miraculously, 304 of the 307 people on board survived. Many, however, sustained serious injuries, while some were thrown from the aircraft during impact and were found on the runway disorientated. Inside the plane, parts of the cabin had also been torn apart. The tail section, now separated from the fuselage, exposed the rear of the aircraft, where 2 flight attendants had been ejected upon impact. While one flight attendant sustained injuries from being pinned by an inflated emergency slide, others navigated the smoky, dimly lit cabin to guide passengers towards exits and clear pathways. At San Francisco General Hospital, dozens of passengers were treated for injuries. Some had suffered fractures, head trauma, and internal injuries, and a handful remained in critical condition with spinal injuries or severe burns. Still, the incident raised critical questions about pilot training, communication in the cockpit, and the handling of emergency situations, leading to questions that would soon lead to a deeper investigation. In the days following the crash, investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, began examining every detail of the incident, determined to understand how a routine landing could go so disastrously wrong. They started with the cockpit recordings, analyzing every word and action taken by the crew. One of the key findings was that the autothrottle, which should have helped maintain the aircraft's speed during approach, was set to hold mode, meaning it was not adjusting the thrust automatically. This left the responsibility of the speed management entirely on the pilots, and with no instrument landing system glide slope available, Captain Lee had to manage the descent manually, and that was indeed a task that required precise control and experience. The investigation also revealed that as the plane descended, Captain Lee had not adequately monitored the airspeed. This was a crucial oversight, as airspeed is essential to ensure a safe landing. Adding to the challenge was the cultural factor in the cockpit dynamics. Captain Lee's hesitation to voice concerns or ask questions may have been influenced by the deference to his instructor, a practice often observed in hierarchical cockpit environments. This hesitation led to delayed responses to critical issues. Further analysis showed that the crew had failed to initiate a go-around at the critical decision height of 500 feet when the approach was evidently unstable. Instead of aborting, Captain Lee pressed forward, attempting to correct the descent without realizing just how low and slow the plane had become. The missed opportunity for a go-round would later be highlighted as a key moment when a different decision could have prevented the crash entirely. Moreover, the NTSB noted that fatigue likely played a role. Having flown across multiple time zones, The crew's internal clocks were still aligned with South Korean time, meaning they were operating at what would typically be considered nighttime back home. Fatigue has long been recognized as a factor that can impair decision-making, situational awareness, and reaction times, potentially contributing to the delayed responses observed during the approach. The investigation also raised questions about the design of the auto-throttle system itself. The hold mode left the speed unchanged without clear alert to the crew, which may have led to the unintentional drop in airspeed. While investigators stopped short of blaming the auto-throttle system directly, they emphasized the importance of ensuring pilots are fully trained on all manual and automated controls. Following the conclusion of investigations, several safety recommendations were made. This included the need for more focused training on manual landings, especially when automated systems are unavailable. Asiana Airlines and other carriers also implemented additional training programs, ensuring that pilots are prepared to handle manual approaches in any conditions. There was also a push to familiarize crews with scenarios where cultural dynamics or hesitation might hinder communication, helping to foster open dialogue in the cockpit and prevent deference from compromising safety. So, there you have it. Thank you for watching, and if you found this story as captivating as we did, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for even more exciting stories like this one. Bye for now, and see you in the next one.